It is 4 p.m. on Monday, March 30th, 2026. I officially call the Liberty Elementary School Governing Board special meeting to order. We are in the Jerry Rovey District office and have 4 board members present. Board Member Zimmerman, Board Member Kenyon, Board Member Cirancione, and myself, Board Member Schmidt. We can move on to 1.2, the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Zimmerman, would you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on to item 1.3, the work study session. This is going to be led by members of the district office, including Becky Williams, Lane Mann, and Miss Michelle May. So if you guys would like to take over, whoever's going first, please.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. So thank you for joining us tonight as we begin our budget work study session. I'd like to frame our discussions around our shared priorities and our collective responsibility to ensure alignment between our instructional goals and resource allocation decisions. Our budget is more than a financial document. It reflects the values we hold as a governing board and organization. The recommendations developed by the district and site leadership and by the guiding coalition represent a collaborative effort to prioritize systems and supports that promote clarity, consistency, and coherence across Liberty Elementary School District, particularly in the areas of equity, leadership, and support. As we begin, I'd like to share a quote reference when the guiding coalition first convened in January. "Not every good idea is fundable, but every idea deserves thoughtful consideration." So tonight we will begin with Ms. Williams, who will share about the budget, projections, and calculations. Then Mr. Mann will share about staffing and enrollment. And then I will conclude us with budget prioritization. And we also have the salary schedule considerations at the end, which is also included as an agenda item 5.3. So I will turn it over to Ms. Williams.
You have in front of you the budget attachments that we presented last meeting as well. I have just updated those. Can we bring those up? Yes, thank you. So this is just an updated of what you saw at the last meeting. I updated with the March numbers. They just include any enrollment that we saw. I also doubled the kindergarten coming into first grade. Then I also updated the budget balance carry forward as of March 19th. So when all of that is said and done, the M&O budget reduction will be approximately $157,000. So the next item is the calculations, page 8, if we can go. And this is just, you saw this before, but I just updated all of the numbers in the budget balance carry forward as of March 19th and the new RCL with the new ADM numbers. So we're looking at a budget approximately $37,888,000. And then the next item is the projections for the staff increases. That stayed the same. Across the top, the one that's, yes, thank you. There's no changes there. That's just a carry. And then the next item that we were asked to present are the stipends. And if you will go to the first orange tab at the bottom. Thank you. If you want to go in yourselves and kind of see how much was spent in any area, I did put this so that you can filter on any of the different signing bonuses or any of the other stipends that you might want to look at. The next orange tab at the bottom, this is by school, Liberty, Freedom, and then if you scroll down, it has all of the schools. And this is for the full year of 24-25. Because we have not had a full year yet this year, we wanted to be able to compare the 2 years. So that's why we're looking at this one. And then if you go back to the top, over to the right. Yes, thank you. This is a combined number for the district. So these are district totals. And then I also put the fund that they're being paid out of. So that's what you'll see on that spreadsheet. And then today we took and did the one that says teacher stipend. We did elaborate on that, and that's a new spreadsheet that you have here tonight.
I just want to ask a clear. Is it working? I just want to clarify that one that we sent today, those numbers are from the 24-25 school year.
I
Is that
believe
correct?
so. I did not ask for the 25-26 because 25-26 is not finalized for the,
Okay.
yes. Any other questions? If not, I will turn it over to the next, Mr. Mann.
Okay. I have a lot of questions, or not a lot, but I have several. And I also think the board should have, Ms. Schmidt, maybe some discussion about some of these items so that we can ask questions. And, you know, we have principals here that if we have questions. So when you factored, when you did the ADM, because the district is recommending adding 8th grade to Loretta Zumbro, which I'm not sure when that'd be appropriate for the board to discuss, but did you add that potential ADM into the ADM number?
It's already there because those students already attend. They're at Blue and at the Las Brisas, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay. I think that just one of the things that I want to point out, you know, in transparency to the public and for the board to keep in mind is that we're still making the transfer from DAA to M&O. We're still transferring
Yes.
$600,000. So essentially we're still living outside, I say living out of our means of M&O, what we're allotted, and we're taking money from capital that I think we've all said we need, right? And we're going to be out of bond money. So as we, you know, talk about budget reductions tonight, I think it's really important that the board keep that in mind because we need to try to get to a point where we don't have to do that. I think so. I'll speak for myself.
Yeah.
I think we need to get to a point because I think we need those capital monies for, you know, capital needs. So, and just for clarification, when we need to reduce the M&O budget by 157,000, that does not include the encumbrance of the assistant soup of ed services.
You're correct.
Okay, so I assume I'm going to speak for myself. I want that position. So then we would need to consider reducing more to be able to have that position. The other open positions, as I thought through this, I think we've paid them in different ways, right? We paid out Mr. McDonald. You know, we're paying a stipend to Miss May. We're paying you in replace of the finance director. So I think those are going to be more of a wash, but that we have not paid anyone a stipend or anybody for that assistant soup. So I think that, you know,
when we think about what we need to reduce, I think we have to really consider that. Okay, so on the colored sheet paper, it says lead stipends, $62,000, and that it says it's paid by grants. So is that Project Momentum money that we're paying those lead stipends out of?
This one here.
Yes, that is Project Momentum funds.
Okay. And do we know, are we getting Project Momentum funds next year?
No, the grant is going to be ending 9/30.
Okay. So we will have no Project Momentum.
Correct.
Okay. So that is another area that the board essentially needs to look at, because I'd have to look at a budget sheet, but I want to say it's like around $160,000. Like a monthly budget
Oh, for
for Project Momentum.
This past year, we got 162,000 for the whole year and a half.
Okay. But we're not going to have that money that we've used, right?
Correct.
So these lead stipends, either, again, we're going to have to, I don't know how we're going to find money that we already don't have, right? Okay. So the instructional coach extra duty, on the FY20, well, it's on both for around $40,000. What is that for? What are we paying our instructional coaches extra duty to do?
one of the principals will have to answer. I don't know what that stipend is for.
Yeah. Oh, No, we
if-
need a
Come
mic,
on up
sorry.
here next to Mindy, over here. Thank you.
I believe that is for NTO and their extra contractual days, but that actually might, Michelle, do you know from Ed Services? I think it's just their NTO time. Because those are not.
I'm
billed.
sorry, I was handing a packet
That's
to
okay.
Dr. Doozy in the audience, so.
The NTO is not in their contract, so I believe that stipend comes from there, but I don't know if there's anything else from there.
Yeah, and that would be a Miss Williams question.
It's not in their contract, I don't believe, right?
There was 3 different stipends amounts. There was a PD, NTO, and then extra responsibility duties for all instructional coaches. So in that funds, there was the 3 different titles.
okay. So it's on the salary wage schedules. So if you, sorry. So the instructional coach wage schedule has new teacher orientation at 1,000, leadership development at 1,000, and extra duty responsibility at 1,000. So we only have 7 instructional coaches. So I'm just curious, how did we get to $40,000?
It must have been extra duty days.
So we're paying them $1,000 a day when they're doing an extra duty?
I'm sorry, I do not know that because I'm not in that HR position. I do.
And I'm sorry, that was before my time. I'm looking at, Kendra, do you have any thoughts there on that? Ms. Goodyear, do you want to come up? Okay, you want to come on up? Thank you. Come on up to sit next to Mindy there. Thank you.
I believe, I do know that we have a contract that starts at a certain time, but it does not include NTO. So there is the stipend for NTO. There is,
Can I just ask, do you know if you're getting, and this is, I'm not trying to single you out. I'm just trying
we
to
getting that?
understand where it's coming from.
and I'm wondering if they're in that year, if we also attended professional developments that the coaches were sent to because of the new curriculums, if that was included in there for being paid for those times, that could have been it as well.
Okay, so for when you say NTO, do you think you're getting $1,000 for the whole thing or per day?
It's $1,000 for new teacher induction. So it's for those 4 days. It is not per day.
Okay. So, and I just want to be clear, like I did send this question ahead of time. So I'm not like trying to surprise anybody, but when we're talking about 7 people getting $40,000 and we're trying to find money, I'm just trying to understand how we got to that point. Because when I look at these stipends and you're saying you're only getting 1,000 for 4 days.
And I believe there was another stipend that occurred afterwards because we were required to attend the leadership that happens at the end of the year, which is also outside of our contract days. So we attend that with our principals and stuff as well. So there was another stipend for that week as well.
Okay, so that would be 7,000, 14,000. Okay.
And so, yes, if this was in the summer of 24, before or 24, 25, I mean, I'm not sure if it was even July of 24 and, June of 25, that was before I arrived. So we just have to go on to what, I know Ms. Williams, you were here just to try to figure out where that 40,000 came from. It could be from professional development. Thank you, Kendra, for explaining that they were not getting $1,000 a day, but for the week.
Yeah. I think these are some of the things though that we have to look at because, we're going to have to find money and, it may seem like small amounts here or there, but we have to find it somewhere. And it was something that stuck out to me.
So just to follow up, I imagine that would not happen this year. So.
Okay. But then I feel like if we want to count that, we have to know how much we're actually going to need to know what we can count as a savings. So I think that's what's difficult for me. And like some of these things on here, I wouldn't necessarily count as like a stipend. Like I wouldn't count severance pay as a stipend. So that's where I have a little bit of a hard time. The leader in me, that's 4,000. This is doesn't seem to be on FY26. I don't know if the bill hasn't come, but is that paying for the program or is that paying for PD for teachers?
I believe that was PD because it was like $126 per person for 36 people.
Okay. So and then if you look at the teacher stipends, because obviously that's, the biggest amount. Oh, I know. The other thing that I wanted to look at is the contract signing bonus. If we could go back to FY26, the colored ones. Yep. And then totals. I think if you keep, yeah. And then if you go all the way over, sorry. Okay. So the contract signing bonus says it's coming out of M&O, but one of the things that the board voted on when we did our reductions last March was to pay that out of classroom site fund.
I was looking at that today and I don't see that on the list.
It's on the April 15th meeting, the budget prioritization.
Okay, I'll go back and look at that because I was looking at all of those today and we were going to go through and make sure all of those had been met.
Yeah, those are some of my questions too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when you look at the number, obviously the teacher stipends, 366,000 and last year it was more, it was like 450,000. That's the biggest amount, right? If we wanted to look at that, but that's also money that teachers count on for, their pay. They're already counting on that money. And so, I think it's going to be difficult essentially probably for the board to reduce that because essentially we're like reducing someone's salary by doing that. But I think it would be very smart of the board to have a discussion about what could we kind of grandfather in and then maybe make changes for new employees so that we don't continue to put ourselves in this position. Because again, in the back of my mind, I'm always still keeping that 600,000, to me, we still have to find a way to get out of that. And so, you know, President Schmidt, I don't know if you want to have a discussion about that or you just want people to share their thoughts right now, but I think we have to make some sort of decisions eventually tonight. So.
Discussion is fine. If people have comments that they would like to make or discussion they would like to have right now, if you would like to think on it, we can move on and then have time at the end so that we can make sure we get through all three presentations. If we're doing about a half an hour each, we still have about 10 minutes for this one. So if there's other comments from other board members, please.
Yeah, President Schmidt. So my thoughts on this, and I've wanted to see these stipends for a little while, and thank you, administration, for providing these. There's a few on here that obviously are very helpful to help promote staff to grow, and they, you know, if they get certain achievements, right, they can earn that stipend. However, there's a number of them that in my mind, stipends, we're very stipend heavy. I mean, very, very stipend heavy as a district. And I do like what Board Member Zimmerman was talking about, where we do have to look at these and see what we can do and possibly even do the grandfather thing. But my thoughts initially is, what of these, and this is for the board and administration can comment on this and provide feedback as well, but what of these stipends would seem most reasonable to roll into salaries and just eliminate the stipend? And maybe the salary isn't quite as much as just adding the stipend in for new employees coming on. But when it comes to it, I mean, I know why stipends are there, right? Not just as an incentive, but they're also easy to strip away. They're hard. It's hard making that decision. It's an emotional decision, especially when staff are counting on it. But it's much harder for a board to go back and reduce somebody's salary than it is just say, you know what, we can't have this stipend, let's just cut it. So I understand why they're here, but with Ms. Williams, I think somebody put in their email, these stipends equate to about almost $3.5 million.
Yes.
That is huge.
Yes.
That's huge. And so we really do need to have this conversation about what stipends should be allotted and which ones are just kind of above and beyond, which it's great when a district can give above and beyond, but when you're in the position we are as a district, we have to be very, very fiscally responsible with this stuff. And growing pains kind of hurt sometimes, especially when there's not a lot of money going around. So those are just my comments for the board to think about.
Just a quick question. If we do, like Mr. Kenyon was saying, so one thing I can see being a problem with, if we make it part of the salary, then the next year, if they're no longer doing that job, but then they get an increase, it's going to take that stipend into the percentage increase, even though they're not doing it the next year.
That's correct. My suggestion would be at this point for stipends is to put a committee together to evaluate these with the board's direction on their top 10 or 15 to evaluate, and then have a committee come back to the board either during this year or next year, however you want to do it, and then really dive into what it takes to get that stipend. And then does it need to continue, or is this something that has been just rolled over from history and no one's ever paid attention to stop it? So that would be my suggestion.
I agree. I feel like the stipend thing needs its own work study.
Yes.
It's too deep for us to do in the next 6 minutes.
Yes.
Just a couple of other things for the board to consider as we think about all these things is that some of these things have already been eliminated for this year. So the 504 leads, not every school has them.
Okay.
Because that was part of the reductions last year. So schools with APs, principals, you can help me. I think you guys got to choose 2 of the 4 principals with APs. You got to choose 2 of the 4. 504 gifted, EL maybe, but it's okay. We don't, but I'm just saying that this number has already been reduced. So the athletic directors, these numbers, only Liberty and Estrella are paying athletic directors because the APs, again, this was part of our reductions last year. So I know you pulled these from last year. I'm just highlighting for, the public and for the board that some of this stuff has been changed. And so we need to kind of keep that in mind as we do this. I think the problem, I agree with everybody that, we need to dive deeper into this, but the problem that we get into is that they're on the salary schedule that we are being asked to approve tonight. And so, we're kind of, again, just rolling the problem, I guess, into next year. Again, we're going to be in the same sort of position. So
You could approve the salary schedule excluding all stipends if you would like. And that way we would have time in the next 3 months to maybe go into it a little deeper.
Any other further discussion on this right now? All right, then I think we can move on to the next item, which I think is Mr. Mann, if you would like to go ahead.
President Schmidt, Liberty Board. I was tasked with helping to provide the staffing plan. The 2026-27 staffing recommendations are a result of a structured, multi-phase process designed to ensure data-driven recommendations across all 8 campuses, transparency and methodology, and decisions grounded in verified enrollment data. Staffing decisions affect real people, educators, students, and families. The district approached this process with seriousness, care, and a commitment to fairness. What follows is a summary of the methodology, consultations, and guiding principles that shape the final recommendations presented to the Liberty Board. Phase 1, understanding the landscape. Before projections or recommendations were developed, district leadership conducted a review of historical staffing practices. Due to personnel transitions of recent, prior processes were not fully documented or consistently applied. The district took deliberate steps to research previous staffing cycles and evaluate the implications of various approaches. This foundation was essential. Rather than simply inheriting past decisions, leadership worked to establish a clear, principled methodology rooted in consistency and data. Phase 2, enrollment analysis and projections. Enrollment projections served as the primary driver of staffing decisions. A grade level roll-up methodology was applied across all 8 campuses. Each current grade cohort was advanced to the next grade level to the projected 26-27 placement. Graduating 8th graders cohorts were removed from head counts, reflecting FTE naturally existing, exiting the system. Incoming kindergarten cohorts were projected using registration trends and historical enrollment patterns. The incoming kindergarten was the same as this year's kindergarten. While final enrollment will not be known until students arrive in August, responsible planning requires action based on the data available. Waiting for Phase 3, board approved class size bands and standard to ensure equity. The district consistently applied board approved class size bands as the benchmark for teacher to student ratios, rather than making site by site exceptions based on history or preferences. The same standard was applied to every campus. This approach ensures no campus received preferential treatment. The rationale used for one campus is the same rationale used for all. Decisions remain objective and depersonalized. Consistency was a central quality safeguarded throughout the process. Phase 4, FTE verification with HR, payroll, and business services. Accurate baseline data was critical. My team and the business services teams worked directly with human resources and payroll to conduct a position by position verification of FTE allocations at each campus. This verification concerned who was employed at what FTE level and at what site. Phase 5, campus by campus, grade by grade review. With verified FTE data, the enrollment projections in hand, the district conducted a detailed review of each campus, school by school, grade by grade, and position by position. This was not a top-level budget exercise. It was a granular analysis that considered projected enrollment and required classroom sections, current certified and classified staffing levels, whether existing FTE met, exceeded, or fell short of projected needs, operational requirements beyond classroom instruction. Every campus has a unique context. That context was acknowledged and discussed. The objective was not to identify cuts, but determine the appropriate staffing levels aligned to projected enrollment and operational needs. Phase 6, principal survey and stakeholder input. Principals, as instructional leaders closest to the daily campus operations, were asked to complete staffing surveys, identifying priorities and needs for the 26-27 school year. This input was substantive and meaningful. Every response was reviewed. Feedback was discussed during cabinet meetings. Requests tied directly to student outcomes and campus operations were prioritized. In many cases, the principal requests aligned with the enrollment data. Where they diverged, district leadership worked to understand the discrepancy and balance both professional insight and quantitative data. Phase 7, budget alignment with business services. Staffing must align with the fiscal reality. The Executive Director of Business Services, Becky Williams, partnered throughout the process to ensure recommendations were financially responsible. The goal was right sizing, not overstaffing, not understaffing, calibrated to projected enrollment and sustainable funding levels. Phase 8, budget prioritization guiding coalition. A district-wide budget prioritization process occurred concurrently, and this is what Ms. May will speak on later. Phase 9, cabinet review and superintendent consultation. Staffing recommendations were not finalized, or the recommendations were not finalized by a single individual or department. Cabinet level meetings were convened to discuss the staffing strategy, surface cross-functional perspectives, ensure organizational alignment. Interim Superintendent Michelle May was consulted throughout the process. The plan reflects a collective professional judgment grounded in collaboration and transparency. Phase 10, special circumstances, Loretta Zumbro Elementary. Some campuses required additional review due to unique conditions. Loretta Zumbro warrants that specific explanation. Zumbro is expanding to include a 7th grade program, the 26-27th grade, with an 8th grade under discussion. This growth requires additional certified classroom FTE directly tied to enrollment increases and applied using the same methodology used district-wide. Operational support. The campus serves the medically fragile students who required the consistent presence of an assigned nurse. When the office manager is absent, the front office lacks coverage, an operational gap for students serving high-need students. The addition of a school secretary addresses this need and aligns with staffing models across the other district campuses. So, in short, I'm gonna stop with the explanation here, but this staffing recommendations was carefully conducted by the entire district team, and I would be glad to take you guys through it however you see fit. Would you like to ask questions? I know you've all probably reviewed it, or would you like me to walk you through it?
Do people have a preference? Go ahead.
I mean, I don't know if we could just ask questions about each school, if I could ask some general questions first, but yeah, I have questions, and I don't for almost every school, but I have some general questions if that's okay, Ms. Schmidt.
Yes, please.
Okay. So one of my first questions is I see a lot of 0.5 positions, and I want to know, how do you see that being actually implemented, especially at the junior high level? Because I feel like the 0.5s give a misleading view of the class size, because I don't think in junior high you can have a 0.5 unless you can explain to me how you see it implemented.
So thank you. From a curricular perspective, the 0.5, I think it especially works in junior high. You have a teacher that teaches both 7th and 8th grade, right? One full-time teacher, half their time teaching 7th, half their time teaching 8th.
Okay, so are you believing that, because again, in grade, you're not dividing the grades. Okay, so I understand. I think probably most of our schools, teachers teach multiple grades.
Yep.
But we're talking about groups of kids. And so if you cannot divide half of a 7th grade group and half of an 8th grade group and put them in a class together, because they're not being taught the same thing. Because kids move in groups. So if you have 40 7th graders, okay, and you say, well, they can have 1.5 teachers, okay, but how are you dividing those 7th grade students?
So my understanding, and I think I can tell that we have there's a gap in our understanding. So let's say we have a 7th grade class and an 8th grade class, and they're allotted 3 teachers total. And it would be a 1.5 allotment and a 1.5. One of those teachers would split their time between the 7th and 8th grade classes. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, but I think you're not understanding.
I'm probably not, which is okay. I apologize.
Yeah, you want to try to word it differently?
I may be way off, but maybe you should understand what she's saying. So mathematically it works, but scheduling it, how's it going to work?
Yeah, that a lot of times we do departmentalize. The district does have a history of what do we call them, classes? Combo classes. That's one option.
But in junior high,
Yeah.
we don't do combo classes in junior high.
So if we had English and social studies, and we had science and math, and then we had another teacher do that, there's a way to rotate through that. If they wanted to specialize or departmentalize, that's one methodology. And so looking at, okay, the context, we could have staffed it with the full FTEs. We chose to staff it with the half FTEs and creative scheduling, so that we would be able to get closer to those bands and provide the, go ahead.
Okay. I hear what you're saying, but you can't, when you say that they're going to teach a section, like they can teach different grade levels, but when you talk about groups of kids, if you have 40 7th graders, okay, even if the teacher is teaching 7th and 8th, you can't divide half of those. You can't take 10 of those 7th graders out and say, oh, I'm going to put you with 8th grade.
No, you
No.
can't.
Okay, so it doesn't work. Like, I guess what I'm going to ask then, because I don't think you're understanding, is are you going to give principals autonomy to essentially, you gave them the staffing, and are they going to be able to assign that teacher to groups of kids as they see fit?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they would have X number of FTEs and they would decide what to do with it. Now, when we band those up and we look at the colors of those band, then it's not going to look as nice as it looks now. So we need to represent that in probably multiple different ways.
Right. Well, that's my concern, though, is because you can't divide children. You can't divide children. I feel like this document with all the 0.5s is misrepresenting what the actual class sizes are going to be. So I am going to pick on Estrella just because I know Estrella. My kids go there. I'm familiar with it. I'm sorry, Miss Boris. But if you look at Estrella, okay, you have given 6th grade 2.5 and 8th grade 2.5. If you give them, because you're not going to take half of those 6th graders or 1/3 of them and combine them with 8th, because yes, the teacher you hire, but the groups of kids that are rotating around have to be in the same grade level. And so the actual number is either going to be 35 in a class or 24 in a class, because eventually you're going to have to combine those FTEs for groups of children.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay.
It absolutely does.
So do you see how my concern, because when you go to bring us a classroom, homeroom list in August, you're not going to see all this green. You're going to see red, you're going to see blue.
And you're going to see
Right.
blue. Yeah, yellow. Yeah.
So I just want to understand that if we finish our discussion and the board kind of agrees with the allotment, that then the principals have the autonomy to decide how to combine the 0.5s.
Yeah. Yeah, it was never the district's or cabinet's desire to structure it in such a way that would tie the hands of a principal. We wanted to right staff the FTE and then give the principals the opportunity to staff their schools as they should.
Could I jump in real quick? I'm just going to ask for a quick demonstration. Trissa, Holden, Melinda, will you come stand right up here at the front real quick? Chop, chop. Okay, so we're talking about 1.5 teachers in 7th grade and 1.5 teachers in 8th grade. So what that looks like is, Holden, will you step forward? And Melinda, will you step forward? Okay, this is a 7th grade teacher, ELA and math. Okay, Melinda, and Holden is representing 8th grade ELA and math. So that's your one teacher, one teacher. Now, Triss on the back is going to represent teaching 7th grade and 8th grade science and social studies. So here's how the 1.5 looks, or the half-time teacher. So looking at Estrella, you have a 2.5 6th grade and a 2.5 8th grade. So it would be something similar. So the half-time teacher is the teacher of record in Estrella, since that's what we're just looking at, for 6th grade science and social studies, and then for 8th grade science and social studies. And that's where that half comes into play. So there is some autonomy of how this works. It has worked. We have used half times. It is not ideal. It is never our wish, but there's current practice happening on our sites that allows for that half time.
Yeah. Okay. But now you've had 2 7th graders and 2 8th graders. So in those 7th and 8th grade classrooms, you have 35 students because you can't divide kids. I understand they're teaching multiple grade levels, but I'm just making it clear that the class size is still high.
And that's why the figure here is a class average.
Thank you. You guys can have a seat.
Okay,
But I understand.
it's not really a class average.
When you have 35 kids in your classroom, I get it. I get what you're saying. But I hear exactly what you're saying. I hear your concern, and we'll address that.
Well, I mean, I think we have to make hard decisions. I'm not saying that I'm not saying we don't have to do this. I just wanted to be clear that when the homeroom list comes out, this is going to look different. It's not going to look as nice of an average.
It is a little messy.
Okay.
So, we are trying to staff conservatively. So if we look through all of the half times here and we increase it on each of the school sites, we are going to not decrease FTEs, which is the ask from the board. We will be increasing. So it is not necessarily, doesn't fit into a mold. We're just trying to do our best with current staffing allocations, et cetera.
Right. I agree with that. I just wanted clarification that we're then giving the principals the autonomy and that it's understood that some classes are going to be bigger because again, you can't divide kids.
I appreciate the analytical clarity there too. I really do appreciate it.
Okay.
Additionally, after school begins, and this is not ideal, we want to hire the best high quality teachers that we can possibly get. And right now is the time to find high quality teachers. With that said, we do have a classroom site fund that will, that's outside of M&O. In the event that we have a high class size, we are able to add another teacher, an FTE, and not use M&O through this classroom site fund. So we will be actively looking. And again, remember, I said the caveat is we want the high quality teachers now. We don't want to wait, but we have that ability in the event that we have class sizes get too high.
Right. But we also need to be really careful because classroom site fund is not necessarily sustainable to just start adding teachers because then you have to keep doing it. So we need to be cognizant of that.
Okay, sorry. So there's classroom site reduction funds. That's a separate bucket.
Oh, is that what you're referring to? Okay. If we want, we can go through the schools
Yeah.
if you want, and then
Yeah.
I'll ask questions at the end.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Brian.
Yes, please.
Maybe you'll get to it, but I was looking at the current, was this one. Okay, and so I just picked on Westar and added it all up. So FY 25-26, right? So it should be 38, correct? Not 36.
Yeah, so this has been I apologize, it's been a living document.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a draft document. Go ahead, though.
So, but are you going to go to each school individually, you said? Second, once
Yes.
we get to there.
Yeah.
All right. I'll just wait till we get to that one and ask some more of the questions.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's start with Liberty. And remember, this is a baseline staffing recommendation. There's budget prioritization recommendations that are going to be made later on. A couple of things that I know we're going to have questions about, and I'll just address them early, we decided as a team that schools should have a school secretary and an office manager, and that came from asks from the campuses, and we were almost there anyways. And so adding a 0.5 at Liberty, I believe, and then we had a personnel matter where we moved a 1 FTE from Blue over to Loretta Zumbro. But that's the rationale behind some of that. I know there's going to be some questions about that. If you want, we can get into it.
Okay. Well, if we're going by school, then so Liberty currently has an office manager and a 0.75 secretary. Is that what you're saying currently?
Yeah. So we brought that up to we were going to bring it up to a 1 FTE.
Okay. And so what formula did you use to decide that was needed? Because when you look at, schools that have 800 students and schools that have 300
Yep.
students, the need is not the same.
And I would agree that the need is not the same, but all schools, they have a need for that administrative need. When the secretary is out, who's going to cover? And those small schools have duties that need to be covered. And so we found we were almost there we might as well, have it even across the board, because a lot of the small schools were having issues with not having those positions staffed.
Yeah, and I think that, if we go through it methodically, I think for me as a board member, it's important that it's equitable, not necessarily equal, because a school of 300 doesn't have the same needs as a school of 800. And so when we're looking at a finite amount of money, it's hard for me to say, yes, they need this, when we're removing something from a school that has a lot more students, a lot more parents, a lot more staff. And so just to say, well, we just want everybody to be the same, but everybody's needs aren't the same.
And we agree. When we had these discussion, we believed that because we were almost there, we believed that it was like a base level of staffing that should happen at each school. And really, it's an addition of 0.25 and an addition of what, 0.5? And yeah. So.
Okay. So, I don't know if the board is going to make decisions, like, I guess in the meeting when we do the budget is when we'll officially talk about it. But my question also is, how do you calculate how many CHAMPS teachers each school gets?
So that's a great question. There's not a formula. We look at active number of sections. So if there's the highest number of sections in a grade level is 4, then they would get 4 CHAMPS teachers. If the section was 3, for example, the highest section at Weststar, I believe, is 3 sections. They have 3 CHAMPS teachers. Blue Horizons, 4. They have 4 CHAMPS teachers, so that they can for that coverage.
Okay, but there is certainly ways to schedule that, because the problem that I see is I'm not sure how the CHAMPS teachers at Liberty and Loretta Zumbro are filling their day when they have 200 students and 300 students, and schools that are double their size only have 1 additional CHAMPS teacher. If we're looking at numbers of schools, numbers of kids that they're servicing, and again, we kind of like Miss Williams says, we shouldn't just keep doing things because we've always done them that way, right? And if we're having to make difficult decisions because of the fiscal situation that we're in, to me, when you combine Liberty and Loretta, they're maybe next year they're going to be at 550. So to me, we should only have 3 CHAMPS teachers between the 2 schools, because that's 550 kids. They should be able to fit them in. Everybody else, schools of 650 fit in, because inevitably they're seeing kids more. So it's not really fair to children, right? They're getting more access to specials than other children just because they happen to be a small school.
So I hear what you're saying, Board Member Zimmerman. Some of those percentile comparisons sort of break down when we're starting a brand new school. If we went by the numbers and offered Loretta Zumbro like a 0.5 CHAMPS teacher, I don't know that would be equitable either. We want to provide our students with a base level experience.
Sure.
And we made the determination, the recommendations to you guys, and we're at the will of the board. So. Okay, so as we go through that, we see that we're recommending a reduction in 1 instructional teacher for Liberty. If we move on to Estrella Mountain, we can see that the ratios from student teacher ratios is 1 to 24.3. It's a solid ratio. We're recommending no changes at Estrella Mountain. Rainbow Valley, we can.
Sorry, I have a question too.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Brian, go.
Give the mic.
Okay. My question is, you said that you were recommending kindergarten be the same. So this year at Estrella, they had 2 kindergartens and you're recommending 3.
Yeah, that number was creeping up.
Oh, I know. I have a kindergartner in Estrella.
Yeah. So those are the staffing considerations that when we went through, we said that, that's a borderline class, right? And if we're estimating that the same are coming in, and that was one of those considerations where it's like, okay, we should probably think about adding another kindergarten.
Okay. But since it's kindergarten and we can watch that enrollment, would it be, again, yeah, it's at yellow. They're at 25 and the red would put them at 26.
Yeah, we looked at that and we had to most strategically add positions where we thought they would mostly be needed. But you're right, we could roll that back and we can watch it.
Or it can be made.
Absorbed into.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
And kindergarten is the most difficult to predict. So all we can do is just roll from current practice, but to keep an eye on that kindergarten is the most difficult to predict.
Most current numbers, though, there's already 24. So
In one class. You have 24 enrolled.
I didn't want to talk on the mic. We currently have 24 open enrollment applications for Estrella. There is a high desire to attend Estrella Mountain for kindergarten. So, yeah, that's what we were looking at as well.
And so just the caveat, right? And is that we want to be careful that we don't open enroll like 3 or 4 over that then forces us to hire a whole new teacher. Like, when we get to Loretta, that's going to be one of my questions is it's really a tricky situation.
absolutely.
Before we move on, just real quick, can you tell me what the ranges you are using for these colors? Because some of them are up in 30 and they're still green. So like what? I know, I can't find it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's the board approved class size.
And then what was the board approved target? 30? No?
It depends on the class.
Yeah. The grades are different.
Gotcha. I had the same question about kindergarten.
So moving on to Rainbow Valley, we're recommending all positions are unchanged, and we have that 1 to 24.3 ratio there. Moving on to West Star, this was one of the more difficult situations. We're recommending 2 classroom teacher reduction, and a 0.5 champs reduction. And I know I'm going to get some questions here. So if we look at the ratio, it's a 1 to 23.6.
So one question I have for this is we have the MAG students down here, which go into,
They push in.
social studies and science. So did you add those into those classes?
Did not.
So I really need to look at that before we talk about moving a teacher out of there.
That is a consideration. They are part of the budget prioritization. They're early top on that because the issue has been raised and we've had meetings about this. So that will be something that you guys will consider.
Okay.
I also think then, if we're making that consideration, then we need to look at every single CCA class that pushes into regular ed, because that's exactly what's happening in kindergarten at Estrella. We have 27 little 5-year-olds in a kindergarten class.
And so this is a scenario where, it's like, I understand this is a big deal that these MAG students and the CCA students are pushing in. But if we consider that across the board, we're in a situation. I mean, we should consider it.
I guess I'm just saying, like, if we're going to do it, then I feel like we need to do it for the other, populations that push in. But
And for all schools.
Yeah.
yeah, for all schools. I'm just using Estrella as an example just because I have firsthand knowledge. That's all.
Yeah.
But I personally think the board needs to have a conversation about MAG in general because we are funding 2 full-time teachers and they are essentially only teaching English, ELA, and math to these students. They are pushing in for science, social studies, specials. And they have extremely low class sizes and we're paying them a $9,000 stipend. I don't find that to be equitable at all. And so I think the board needs to have a serious conversation about that because it's not equitable.
Thank you. Moving on to Freedom. We've got a 125.2 ratio, and the recommendation is a staffing reduction of 1.
I had a question here.
Yes.
About APs. So now we have 2 schools that are going to fall under the threshold of kind of what we have established for having a full-time AP. And I went back in board docs looking for the last time the board had this conversation. And the last time I could find it was April of 2022. And people did not get a full-time AP until they had 700 students. And so when we look at what our other schools have, we have schools that are at 550 and do not have an AP. They have a 0.2. And so we have Freedom that's projected to be at 475 and Rainbow that's projected to be at 560, which is what Estrella is essentially at. They might be at 540, don't quote me. So I think a consideration. Now, obviously, these are Title I schools, right? And so that creates, a different dynamic. But I think it's something that the board should look at if we're talking about, treating, using the same mentality, being consistent in how we apply things. Again, we're going to have to make hard decisions tonight because we have to balance the budget.
Members and remember, I'm just going to pass the mic over to Dr. Avila just to talk a little bit about Title I schools and the possible need for APs.
The information that I would add, for Madam President, members of the board, would be when we talk about equity, we also keep in mind that we have 2 Title I schools. And so as we look at the numbers, we keep in mind, I understand there's a threshold, but also when we have schools with higher needs, they might have lower numbers, but the community has a higher need. So I would ask that we also take that into consideration.
Okay, let's look at Las Brisas. And we have a 1 to 24.1 ratio here, and the recommendation is a reduction of 2 classroom teachers. It's hard to say. This is I know that the question is going to come up for DLI, and in these numbers, in these classroom averages, we did not separate DLI out.
Okay. So, that was my question again. I sent questions ahead of time so that you had the opportunity to process them.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that if we are going to support the program, that we have to look at how the numbers work, because again, you can't have 36 and, non-DLI, I don't know what to call it, just because that's the way the sections, because when you look at first grade, this was my question, do you have current kindergartners that are leaving DLI to make 2 sections work?
That data I don't have for you.
So
it was anticipated that the site, Las Brisas, would be able to, make it work, not easily, of course, to maintain the DLI program, but within this structure. I know that there are situations where there are even combo classes across the DLI.
Ms.
Is there-
Gentry, will you come on up and speak to DLI, please?
Good evening, Governing Board and members of the community. Our DI program, as it is structured, would need to be considerably restructured with the projected staffing plan that is being proposed. In that we have 2 classrooms right now in kindergarten in the DLI program and 1 mainstream English only. So we would either have to change the programming that we offer in terms of half day in the Spanish instruction and half day in English, or have some kind of a rotation where students are cycling through for Spanish content, but it wouldn't be for half the day because they are people. So we,
As we identified. So, you know, I think it's important conversation for the board to have. Like, this is part of your signature program. And so that was the only section that I saw that was an issue. Did you see a second grade level, just so that the board is aware?
yes.
Okay.
So this year to make we made an adjustment and created a 3-4 combo class. So we have in 3rd and 4th grade. So we had 12 third graders move into 4th grade, and they were exposed to 3rd and 4th grade content. And so we're looking at our 3rd grade numbers being, I guess, expanded. Our 3rd graders rolling up to 4th grade this coming school year. We would have 12 students who would be back with that group. So our DLI program with only 3 sections in 4th grade, it would make it a little bit more challenging to have the Spanish for half the day, because we have 2 classrooms currently in 3rd grade that receive Spanish instruction. So that's 40 students.
You know, as I was like trying to compare the things, I pulled up the homeroom list from March, and I don't know how I never noticed this before, but it says that there are 2 sections of 3-4 combo. Is that right?
Yes, we created those sections so that we could have DLI in 2 classrooms and English only in 2 classrooms. So we had 12 3rd graders who moved into those classrooms to make our numbers doable so that we could run the DLI program.
So is that like 6 3rd graders in each section?
Correct.
So both of those sections are primarily 4th grade?
Yes.
So
with 6 3rd graders in each of those classrooms. So this year we're looking at, do we promote some of them to 5th grade? A couple of the students are prepared for 5th grade content because we've assessed them in 3rd and 4th grade interim assessments and are prepared to take on 5th grade content, and they're mature enough, and parents have requested that they move up to 5th, skipping 4th grade, but we have 10 of them who are not prepared for 5th grade at this time. So they'll be rejoining the 3rd graders that are moving up to 4th.
Do these numbers reflect, I'm sure they can hear me. Do these numbers reflect the 7th graders possibly going to Loretta Zumbro?
Loretta Zumbro.
What about the
they
8th
do
graders?
not at this point.
Okay.
Not at this point. If we've identified how many students? We've identified 40 students that are within boundaries for Loretta Zumbro, and we would work to see if we could get them over there.
So this is if everybody stayed.
Yes. So that you're right. That has the potential to bring down the 7th grade numbers. Blue Horizons. So this was really a working document. If we look at Blue Horizons, we got a 1 to 25.7. That's the highest student ratio average in the district. And the numbers that are here in yellow, we stopped the count last Tuesday on the 24th. And that's where this was frozen because at some point we had to freeze it. You know, this was kind of a working, living document for a long time. And these were in the green, but they, as of the last couple of weeks, have inched up into the yellow, and they're of concern.
And, you know, to be honest, I think they're okay because they're at the first number of yellow. So again, we can't add another teacher. You'll be way in the blue. But this is a situation where you need to, I think that the district needs to close open enrollment in those grade levels, right? That
makes sense.
But I think the numbers are fine.
If we look here next at Loretta Zumbro, we're going to see that there's an addition of 3 classroom FTE. Those certified FTE come from adding a 7th grade and then adding an additional section to kindergarten. And then what's the third? And then, the 2 and 7th grade. Sorry.
Okay, I had quite a few questions for Loretta Zumbro. So again, you mentioned at the beginning that the kindergarten numbers, you were recommending the same. So, we've added a teacher here. How many students have you enrolled for kindergarten at Loretta Zumbro at this point? Or have those open enrollment applications?
$12 open enrollment applications and enrolled 14 so far.
Okay. So you haven't accepted any open enrollments, or you have?
We have not.
Okay. So, and do you know how many current kindergartners are on open enrollment to give us an idea if, we'll have the rest enroll?
We have 4 currently on open enrollment in kindergarten.
Oh, okay.
So 21 neighborhood students.
Okay. So you might be able to get to 2. Again, in my head, I think kindergarten, maybe we be conservative, right? And make sure we have the, closer to the bodies that we need, because obviously 12 and a half, we don't want to end up there. If we want to talk, I'll just offer my opinion about 8th grade. I personally do not think we should add 8th grade. I do not see any student being like, I'm going to leave my school in the last year. I have an incoming 8th grader, and he would murder me if I suggested he move schools in his last year. So to me, I don't think we're going to see the numbers unless you have personally called all of these families and said, hey, are you going to move your student?
And that was the plan. We
Okay.
were going to recruit, and then we were also, Bruce had said that maybe we could do a junior high night at Loretta Zumbro and kind of attract kiddos over there.
Yeah. I just think it's going to be hard to do. And again, when we're in, a budget deficit, is it needed, I guess, and is it going to, we don't want to end up with, to me, it's really hard to see numbers of 20 kids in a junior high class when we have kindergartners sitting at 25, right? I don't find that's hard for me as a parent, as a board member. So I have the same question about champs. Again, I don't think it's equitable. I don't, everybody can be exposed to champs and still be equitable when you have schools that have 650 kids that have 3 champs, and you're saying a school of 250 should have 2. That's 400 children different. So inevitably they are seeing those kids way, way more. And again, I'm not saying remove them, but I think that Loretta Zumbro and Liberty could share champs teachers. They go to one. I think, again, we have to be creative, because just to make it easier for scheduling is not a reason for me to, you know, again, with the FTE situation. My question here for 6th grade, it says they have 36 students and you allotted 2 teachers. But Liberty in 7th grade has 37 students and you allotted 1.5. So how did you determine that they have 1 less student and should get a whole nother FTE and Liberty only get a half FTE?
Yeah, thanks for that question. These are active. It's active and live and dynamic. So like it'll inch up a student or go down a student. These like numbers are accurate as of last Tuesday. So I'm not sure what we were considering in that scenario. Oh, okay. One thing for Loretta Zumbro is it is our school that has grown. It's shown a growth in enrollment, a slight growth. And so we're looking at that. Bruce, do you want to speak to some of the growth that you might have had?
Most of these numbers are going to be nearly spot on, if not accurate. I know that in K through 6 this year, beginning of the school year, first day we had 210 students. As of today, we currently have 243. So that's about 33 students over the course of 3/4 of a year. So projecting that out over the course of a year, we estimated that would be about 40 this year. I won't consider preschool because it's not applicable to this, but preschool has also grown. And just looking at the housing in the area, the subdivisions that are coming up, knowing that we grew 35 to 40 students this year, we anticipate that would grow exponentially in future years simply because of the number of houses that are being built within the circumference. So that's the best I can do on the enrollment question. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's okay. But again, we need to, we said that we were going to apply it the same to each school. And to me, this isn't being applied the same. And so that's the concern that I have. So.
And I understand that and hear that, and that's why I kind of put it as my special case. When you look at this, it's in your packet. It's the LES student enrollment, and it's a chart of enrollment numbers for this year. Loretta Zumbro is the only school that has shown a noticeable increase.
Yeah, and I guess my question would be, is that increase occurring in junior high, which my guess is it's unlikely because.
Again, best estimate I can give you, I know that we were right around 34, 35 at the beginning of the year for our 6th grade students. Again, I'm ballparking. As of today, I believe we're at 40 or 41. So we've grown 6 out of 34. So about not quite 20%, maybe 15%.
So again, I want us to apply the formula the same. And so if we apply it the same as we have other schools, like Liberty's 8th is at 45 and they're only getting 1.5. And Loretta Zumbro's 7th is at 41 and they're getting 2. They should each be at 1.5.
And I hear that, and we'll take the board's direction on that. Our thought was, though, when you have a new school starting out, you have to staff it appropriately so that it can grow into it. But I understand we'll take it back and consider it more.
If I may, I appreciate what administration has brought forward here, and I understand what Board Member Zimmerman's saying. I also understand what you're saying, Mr. Lane, is that, it is a new school. We're working on open new grades. There's going to be challenges that come with that. It's not, 7th grade isn't established there. It's not. So there's going to be new challenges that school is going to have. And again, with what Mr. Naminsky said, there's a lot of growth around there. I understand trying to use the same formula, but the same formula for every school just doesn't always work. As Dr. Avila said, some schools have different needs. It's not just the ADM that go to that school. And so we have to be cognizant of that as well when we're making these decisions. So I thank you for the explanation, Mr. Lane.
Madam President, members of the board, if I could also just add, one of the discussions and considerations for adding the 8th grade to Loretta Zumbro was that is our area for growth that's coming into our district. And as you raised the concern, Member Zimmerman, about not an 8th grade student at LBA not wanting to necessarily go over to a new school, equally we have families coming in, and so what would happen is maybe they have 3 children, maybe a kindergarten, a 4th grade, and an 8th grade, and so if they move into the Loretta Zumbro boundary lines, then what happens is just 2 students go to LZ and the parent has to transfer, transport the 8th grade student to another site, so they are unable to go to the same school as families are moving into the Loretta Zumbro boundaries. So that was part of our discussion and forward thinking of adding the 8th grade to provide new families coming in a home immediately in their boundaries.
And while I can understand that, I also don't want to be fiscally irresponsible and have a class of 15 8th graders where other schools are going to sit at 35.
So that would conclude the.
Okay, just one more question. So I don't see any sped staffing for us to see. So is that going to come to the board at a different time?
At this time, the special services staffing was not included in this, first and foremost, because our students with IEPs, the numbers increasing and not decreasing, and the needs are so different. If you recall in some of the board agendas, you've seen stipends for over number over minutes, and that's because we have a high number of students with IEPs. So what we didn't want to do is bring to the board decrease in staff, first to ensure that we have enough staff to provide all of the minutes that we're required to. And at this time, we currently have vacancies. We have current teacher vacancies on staff. And so right now we were just going to leave it as is. Once we finalize the staffing, get closer to the end of the year, then we'll start looking at our numbers rolling for next year. But right now the proposal is to leave it staffed as is.
Okay, so based on what you said, do you think that there's going to be a need for an increase? Because again, the board would need to account for that.
Looking at last year's number, October 1st count compared to this October 1st count, the numbers look stable. So over a 2-year review, the numbers basically stayed the same. So I would say no. We would stay the same, remain.
All right, thank you. Let's move on and we'll see how much we can get through.
All right, thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'm going to save a lot of narrative to begin with. I'm going to get right to the numbers. So we are looking now at the budget prioritization. It looks like this, the data table. So quickly, a stakeholder committee came together. They brought forth their top 3 priorities from their stakeholder groups and leadership committees. There was discussion, identification, discussion, and then ranking of those items. And that's that first data table that you can see there and the rank that came from that with the estimated annual cost to the district, to the M&O budget. The second data table is just talked about. There were some items that were removed after the prioritization list was formed and the explanation of why. And at the bottom of that first page, just additional ideas that did not make the list for prioritization. A lot of those we were able to fund it via maybe capital or some grant funding, et cetera. So that's the front page. The back page, so that's your final recommended priority items in 3 tiers. So I think that's the one you probably we want to get to and have as much discussion as possible. So the different tiers, the top tier right there and the very top item, and again, I wasn't here last year, but understanding that there were no raises to staff last year. So we are recommending that 2% raise for all staff as a priority. And you can see the ranking there, it was 0. So the ones that have 0 ranked did not come to the Guiding Coalition, the Budget Committee, but in cabinet discussions, we decided that these should take priority for your consideration. The second thing there is that teachers from that 2% raise in staff, we would allocate or we would recommend that the teacher's 2% increase be paid from the 301 or classroom site funds, and there's the amount there. And then it kind of continues on. I don't need to read all of them to you. And then towards the very end of that top tier, the first one that was the highest ranked number 1 begins that process there. So we are hoping that you'll consider that top tier as strong possibilities, and then get into the tier 2 hopefully throughout the year. And then you can see the explanations. A lot of times it's equity or providing support, etc. So I will entertain questions now on the final recommendations.
Can you tell us who served on the budget committee, please?
You know, I do not have the names in front of me, but let me go around the table.
Just
I can
their
go around the table.
positions.
Oh,
Just like-
positions. They were district and site leadership members from all different types of leadership. We had an office manager, we had principals, we had APs, assistant principals, we had instructional coaches. We had the leadership from each of the district department heads. And again, I can go around the room in my memory and give you all the names if you wanted.
That's okay.
But all leadership, including classified, certified, administrative, were represented in that.
Okay, so we had no teachers on the committee?
No, we did have teachers. Yes. We had a reading interventionist.
Okay, so one teacher.
One teacher, one IC. I think there were 2 principals. We had a total of 15 people. It was our 8 schools plus our 7 different district leaders, then plus me, equated to 16. We wanted to have a very balanced. I didn't want to have any area necessarily top heavy than another. Equally with that, I think I had 2 principals on there because again, they have a more bird's eye overarching view, but I thought it was very important to have classified, certified, admin, and all the different types of leadership involved in that committee work.
Okay. And so it was heavy on the leadership part though, like, not a lot of teacher voice. Did you have any parents?
So that was part of the whole site bringing those recommendations to us. So stakeholders, parents, committee members through PTO, site council were involved in the site conversations prior to coming to this committee. So absolutely their voices were heard.
Okay.
They met in their leadership teams with teachers, with classified staff, with parents, with community members. That was my task to all of the principals and then also to all the representatives that came to the Guiding Coalition committee meeting. So yes, all voices, including stakeholders, were heard.
Okay. Did the committee provide input on reduction? So although I, appreciate that, the things that they're looking for, I think we have established for a while that we are going to have to reduce the budget. And so did they provide any input on the reduction potentials?
The committee did not provide any recommendations for reductions. That was done in cabinet, and that is that lower data table that is reduction considerations. So in meeting with leadership, both site and district, we provided that there below for you.
Okay. Did you just want to save the discussion for the meeting, like about the prioritization, or?
We could do that since we were trying to figure out if we needed to cut it off at 5:30. But we could end here for our special meeting, and this is on the agenda later as an actual action item, so we can continue discussion then and have action at that time. If members on the board are in agreement, I think that's fine.
I don't know if all of our principals and, you know, different people that are here if we need to ask questions, just
That is also fair. Are there any specific questions right now that we have that principals might be needed for that we could ask? Otherwise, the agenda is not heavy, and so I think we may get back to this fairly quickly once the meeting starts.
Yes, and I also have more than just principals in the audience to reflect all different departments. So if you have like specific areas that you have questions on, that at least they'll know whether they need to stay or not.
Ms. Williams, can I ask, you know, you said that you looked back at the cuts that we made last year. So I also looked at that today too, or over the weekend. And like one of the things that we said we were going to cut was like $277,000 of consulting. So is that something that you're exploring to see if we actually?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm going through each one of them. And today I was evaluating whether it was an FTE or a dollar amount.
Okay.
And then to verify, I was going through 24 to see what our actual numbers were. And then I'll go through 25, 26 to make sure that those reductions were actually made so that this year's FTEs are what was agreed upon.
Okay. I'm fine either way if we want to just discuss it in actual.
Okay, just for, so everybody is aware, the budget prioritization is the first general business agenda item. So I do believe we will get to it pretty quickly. But we can, it's 5:31. We'll end this special meeting right now. Take a 5-minute recess so that we can sort of clean up everything here. And if you need to use the restroom or whatever, and then we will start the regular meeting at 5:37. It is 5:39 p.m. on Monday, March 30th, 2026. I call the Liberty Elementary School Governing Board regular meeting to order. We are in the Jerry Roby District office, and we have 4 board members present: Board Member Kenyon, Board Member Zimmerman, Vice President Cirincione, and myself, Board Member Schmidt. We can move to agenda item 3.2, approval of the special meeting agenda.
A motion to approve the special meeting agenda form consistent with Board Policy 1-302 and temporarily suspend governing board policy with which this agenda may be inconsistent.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We can take a vote. Board Member Kenyon?
Aye.
Board Member Zimmerman?
Aye.
Board Member Cirincione?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We will show that passed 4-0. Item 4.1, approval of consent agenda. Anybody have anything that needs to be pulled from the consent agenda?
I make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We can take a vote. Board Member Kenyon?
Aye.
Board Member Zimmerman?
Aye.
Board Member Cirincione?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We'll show the consent agenda passed 4-0. Sorry, tired. General business 5.1, discussion consideration to provide interim superintendent direction on budget priorities. So this is our continuation from our study session, our work session. Open to the board for discussion and comments, please.
Madam President, if I may.
Yes, please.
I would like to ask, what's our deadline for approving this, just for everybody's sake? Whoever, sorry, Ms. Williams.
Yes, we have to have the proposed budget due by June the 15th or adopted and submitted.
Okay, thank you. The reason why I wanted to make sure that that was highlighted is I think we should have started this work a long time ago. It's very hard for us to dive through all the data that's here in just an hour or two. And I know administration is looking for direction tonight. I know the board has a lot of questions and trying to get on the same page of where we want to go as a district with this budget. I think it's good that we have the conversation, that we air out the questions. However, I don't know personally if I'm ready to jump into this. So I think we just continue on if the board wills with the discussion. But I don't know. It's up to the board, I guess, if we are going to go ahead and approve this as is or with the changes. So that's it.
Ms. Schmidt.
Please go ahead.
While I know that, we don't have to have a proposed budget till June, and I agree with Mr. Kenyon that we should have started this process a long time ago. However, we have to make some staffing decisions. Principals need to know who to hire. We talked about trying to get the best. And I think if we push all of this off till, May, June, we're going to create other problems, I guess, for ourselves. So I will just share my thoughts about the budget, what I think, what my opinion would be to do, and then other people can share. I don't know how else to start the discussion, if that's okay, Ms. Schmidt.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So based on the current staffing model, when I looked at the model and I looked at the bands and how they would combine the 0.5s and all of that, I would reduce Loretta Zumbro's kindergarten to 1 until you had the numbers, and I would give them the 1.5 and 1.5 instead of 2s to be equitable to the schools. I can see how we could reduce the 6 staff. The most difficult campus for me, well, 2 most difficult, Liberty's, holy mackerel. I don't know how. I looked at your staffing over and over and over, trying to figure out how you were going to make this work, and I truly couldn't do it. And that is like full transparency. And so, if some way we could give you at least one more teacher, again, when you look at the numbers, right, you have 320, and we're saying you're going to have the same number of teachers as Loretta, that's at 264. Again, that's my concern. We're not applying the formula the same. But I think that we could find a way to reduce 6 FTEs is what I'm saying. So I think that that is an accurate number. We could lose 360,000. Does that number include benefits?
No.
So it would actually be higher.
Yes.
Do you?
I'm sorry. We said our average teacher salary is about 60,000. And so that is what we use to come up with that number.
Okay. And so can you give me an average for what benefits cost?
About 20% of that. So you could add an additional 20%.
So
It's another 72,000.
thank you. So the way that I look at that, like do I think there are a little bit of tweaks maybe with Liberty, Loretta, and possibly Las Brisas? Yes. But I think that overall we could get to 6 less FTE. And I guess I just need to state, like, for my opinion, we have to reduce the budget. So I'm not really looking at any additions except raises. I feel like as a board member, I feel like we need to find a way to give our staff a raise. But in essence, that means we have to find cuts other places. And I will say that I want to make sure that we have the funds for the assistant soup of ed services, because I think that is a very important position. We gutted ed services last year, and, I think it's unfortunate that it didn't get encumbered, but so in my head, we have to cut around 300,000 initially, right? The 157,000, and I'm estimating around 150 for the ed services position, but it's honestly probably a little bit more than that with benefits. So, the current staffing model would kind of, in my brain, wipe it clean. Okay. Now the raises, I think if we give everybody a raise, it's around 450,000. I'm not including the step right now just because that's a lot. I feel uncomfortable with fully putting the raises for teachers in the classroom site fund, because it's meant for additional money, but when you put raises in it, like year over year, and we're counting on that money to keep coming, and it's eventually it could phase out. And so I would be okay maybe pulling 100,000 out of classroom site fund. I'm just sharing my opinion for the board, and then everybody else can offer theirs, which means that we'd need to find, and maybe up to 150. We need to find $300,000 other places in the budget in order to be able to offer a raise to our staff. To me, the easiest place to do it, not the easiest, that's not the right word, but the 7 permanent guest teachers, that position was created from ESSER funds. We no longer have ESSER funds. To me, it's something that we could eliminate. Is that going to be a full savings? No, because inevitably we're going to have to pay subs when they are needed, right? So could we half that amount and call it, half of that if we decide to cut those 7 positions? I don't know. Maybe you could advise us. So I see that. One of the things I asked was for these kindergarten screeners. So this is for the gifted, that's the screener for kindergarten for gifted, right?
Correct.
Okay. So we don't service children for gifted until third grade. We don't have a self-contained program. We don't have the cluster model until third grade. So to me, it doesn't make sense to screen them in kindergarten because we are not going to service them. And I don't think it's truly developmentally appropriate either. And I think there's a lot of research to support that it's too early to identify giftedness for a lot of kids. And then, so again, is that a lot of money? No. But I think we need to try to be creative to find pockets of money in different places without affecting the classroom too much, right? Last year when we did this, it was actually just the four of us then too. You know, I think we all agree we want to try to not touch the classroom as much as possible. I do think that we could eliminate one CHAMPS teacher between Liberty and Loretta to make it equal, or not equal, more equitable in terms of the number of kids that are being, you know, given access, the same amount of access to CHAMPS. The AP is a difficult one. I completely hear what you're saying, that Title I, you know, schools have different needs. And so essentially though, Liberty is a Title I school and we treat them similarly in terms of the AP to Estrella. They have less students, but they're given the same allocation. And so I wonder, could we do could they share an AP? Instead of having two full-time APs, could they share an AP? Again, I'm just throwing out ideas. I'm not saying this is just, because again, I'm looking for $300,000 somewhere. I really would like the board, and this is, again, it affects the classroom. So, but that MAG program, I don't think it's fully being utilized. And I think, you know, right now we're paying a full-time teacher for 12 students that he or she, I don't even know, only has half day, right? They're pushing in to another teacher. So I think, and then, the other thing that I think we have to consider is, because we're not getting Project Momentum money, are we paying any salaries out of Project Momentum, or is it really just additional PD for staff and things like that? Teacher lead stipends.
Member Zimmerman, I'll let Ms. Bruni speak to this, but I believe that we've removed all salaries at this point and it's just for professional development. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The position role was eliminated this past year.
Okay. So, but we are paying stipends out of that money.
Correct.
Okay. So, you know, again, because we need to reduce the budget, even if we don't give raises, we still have to reduce the budget regardless. So I think, you know, the board needs to consider removing those stipends that are being paid out of Project Momentum.
And Member Zimmerman, Madam President, members of the board, I agree with you. And I think looking at the stipends, we could easily find 300,000 if that's kind of what you're looking at from the reduction of stipends. So do keep that in mind, if that's the number you're looking at. Also, if I could just go back, you talked about the classroom site fund, the teacher raises, you're concerned about being paid out of the teacher site fund. And Ms. Williams, I'd like for you to jump in here. But from what I understand is that we could pay for that additional increase for the teachers, and then we could always move it to M&O. But you can't go from M&O to a classroom site fund because that is now supplanting. But we could start at the classroom site fund, and I'll let you speak to how much is in there, Ms. Williams. But that would be my recommendation, is that we use that classroom site fund. We can always move it to M&O, but we cannot go from M&O back to a different fund. That's supplanting. Ms. Williams.
Yes, that's true. For pay raises can come out of classroom site fund, and a lot, and most districts are taking pay raises out of that fund. because it is set aside for teacher increases.
Yeah, I just am looking at the sustainability of it, like long term, because again, I don't want to do what's the right word I'm looking for? A quick solution, right? Because you're saying, well, we can move it into M&O, but remember, we still have that 600,000 that we're already kind of taking from DAA. And I know we're allowed to, but to me, that doesn't mean that we don't need it for capital needs. So how are we going to, we have cut a lot last year. And so to think that we're going to find a way to, if we do raises 200,000 plus 600, that's almost $1 million that we're going to try to move back into M&O. Again, that's going to be difficult unless we see enrollment increase, which we just haven't seen a ton. Yes, the last 2 months it has, but again, it's the will of the board. If that's what everybody else wants to do, then certainly they have the ability to do that. My concern with saying, well, we can find it in the stipends, it's hard to approve that, right, without knowing exactly where we're going to find it. But in the future, I do think the board, at least for the teacher stipend, should consider some reductions in more of in a grandfather way as we hire new staff. So those are my ideas.
And just lastly, coming back to that classroom site fund, again, if you are wanting the 2% raise for all staff, again, that classroom site fund is there. So if you're going to allocate that 2% raise, why not use that classroom site fund for the purpose? And I know you said like sustainability, well, next year we then dip into the M&O to support that if we can't sustain it in the classroom site fund. But to pull it right now from the classroom site fund, from M&O, let me back up. To pull it right now out of M&O then prevents you anytime later on to reverse course and do it out of classroom site fund.
And I understand that. My concern is, again, like, I don't want to just do a quick fix just so we can figure it out, because if it's not sustainable next year, then we're going to be in the same boat. That this is our second year in this boat. And I'm trying not to create a third year in the same boat.
If I can interject, we did get an email today saying the classroom site fund has been approved for next year. And it is an increase. I can't remember the exact dollar amount, but there is an increase to classroom site fund for next year.
And Ms. Williams, do you know what our current fund is in there, the amount in our classroom site fund currently?
I don't have the amount. It should be on the board's documents. I believe right now we're carrying forward about $3 million.
That's what I thought. It was about $3 million.
Madam President?
Yes, please go ahead.
I would agree with, we definitely need to look at, in my opinion, the teacher pay increase and also the classified step increase. I've had a number of classified staff approach me asking if they're going to get the increase since they didn't last year. And that was something that was almost a make and break for a number of these families that are living with this. We all know the cost of everything has just went up. And sadly, these increases don't even keep up with inflation. And so I think we need to take care of our staff. We haven't given them a pay increase last year. I think we got to do our due diligence to make sure that they're funded at least with this as much as we can. And so if we have to find that from somewhere else, whether it be stipends, which there's a lot there in the stipends, or other areas, we definitely need, I think that these two that you have at the top of the priority list is accurate.
I just want to clarify, just so that I make sure I'm on the same page with Mr. Kenyon. So recommended 2% raise for all staff. That is like classified staff and administration, that 204,000. Is that correct?
Correct. So the 2% at the very top, that's kind of whited out, that's for administration and classified. So they would get 2% from M&O, and then the 2% raise for teachers to conclude all employee groups would get the 2%, but the 2% raise for teachers would come out of that $3 million that we have sitting there for the, out of the classroom site fund.
Okay, and then the classified step increase, if we did that, would be in addition to the 2%?
That would be an addition.
Okay.
I had a question about this. The reduction considerations, are they taking into account your recommended priority items? Did you put those back in? Because you're saying like current staffing model is to lose 6 FTEs, but up here we're trying to add more. So did you count for those? Because doing the quick math, you're not.
So I'm not sure I'm understanding your question completely, but so at the bottom there where it says reduction consideration, and can we get this pulled up on the screen? It's the budget prioritization data table so everybody can see that. So at the bottom table, so the current staffing model, the top number, I believe you're referring to Vice President Cerencioni, we talked about the staffing model reducing 6 FTEs. So that is our reduction consideration. We're reducing 6 certified teachers. So that's not part of the prioritization. So then if you go back up, let's see, it's 1, 2, 3. I don't know. It's 8, where it says reinstate 1.5 FTE at Weststar. So we talked about that could be a potential area of concern. So that would now, since we're reducing the 6 FTEs, we'd be adding back in 1.5. So I'm bringing that back as a prioritization in that tier 1 area. So we're eliminating 6. Now we're looking at the budget items. We could include looking at all sites. We talked about LBA just a minute ago with DLI. So we could look at reinstating all 6. But
yeah, I just bring that up
sense?
because we're talking about you're trying to add those up. It doesn't count in the bring the certain positions back too.
Right. Well, I'm not looking at, to be honest with you, I'm not looking at any of it. I'm just looking at raises because we already have to cut $157,000 initially, right? From the ADM essentially. I mean, there are other things, but I'm just using that. Okay. And then if we want the ed services job, the assistant soup, that's 150. So I'm just doing quick math, 300,000. So I'm not looking at adding.
No, I understand. What I'm saying is you were looking at the bottom saying you're counting this off saying, oh, if you got rid of the guest teachers, we'd save 187,000. But I guess I understand what you're saying, but I was making, if we go and like make votes, like that's gonna be less free money up.
could we scroll down so the public could see the reductions there? Thank you.
If we look at those 3 areas of reduction that Board Member Zimmerman mentioned as ones that she was considering, they're the same ones that I had circled, but the FTE reduction, which we have listed at 360, but we said that's not benefits. Benefits would take that to 432. Permanent guest teachers, 187. And then the kindergarten screeners, which is basically $6,000. If you add up those 3, we're at 625 or so in reductions at that point, just to keep the math for everyone right now.
Are the permanent guest teachers, are they getting benefits?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so that'd be an additional 20% on top of that 187. Okay.
Okay, can you give us an updated number?
Yeah, give me a second. So that'd be an additional 3,750. So that brings that to 225 plus 663 is our total for those 3 items, the FTEs with benefits and the kindergarten screeners.
I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not sure if I'm ready to say okay on all 6 of those losses, because we've had so many different discussions about it going into the classrooms being too big now. Do we really need an 8th grade in Red Zumbro? So they might not be directly correlated, but if we talk about using those, if we approve it, then we're saying get rid of all those people. And I don't know if we're ready to do that because it's on their it's on their list to bring some of those things back. So I don't know if we're trying to pick apart this, what's the plan here?
Go ahead. And can you explain the level D school sped rebid with Sierra Schools? And if that seems like an accurate amount, $1 million we could possibly be saving?
So this came up for reduction. So Sierra Schools, we have a contract. The program itself is split between 2 schools. So you have half of the program located at Rainbow Valley and the other half at Liberty. The contract is actually more than 1 million. It's at least 1.5. And then that does not include the summer program, which is at least a few $100,000 more. So it's a very big contract. So one recommendation would be that we look at it, that we rebid it, and that we bring it to the board for discussion. And instead of an automatic renewal, we bid it out to see if there's a less expensive program.
Yeah, and I think that would be prudent on our end, of course. For almost every contract we have, we always need to reevaluate them and see, the landscape's always changing. And so I think it's up to the board, but I would be very much in favor of doing that, going out for a new bid on that.
I think, though, that the idea that we could save $1 million is probably, high number, because inevitably we have to service the students. And just for, what's happened in the past, the reason we went to Sierra Schools is because we had a very difficult time staffing those classrooms and all of those things. So I think this is our 2nd year, but it could be our 3rd.
Madam President, members of the governing board, my understanding is Sierra Schools has been here for 7 years. And just to be clear, the contract is for a number of seats, whether or not those seats are filled. So for example, the seats are not filled. So we're paying for seats that are currently empty.
So right now, we're not currently actually using the service. Is that okay?
How many students? Because I know it's for 12, I believe. So how many students do we have in there?
So there's 2 separate. So you have a level C and a level D. One contract is for 36 students, and then the other contract is for 12.
Okay, so how many do we have in the 36?
Currently, attendance is sometimes less than 30
Okay, but-
students per day.
Okay, but how many do we have, assigned to that? Could you say attendance, like
So the
30?
number of students who are in there right now is less than 30 in the program.
In the program?
Yes.
Okay, and then for the 12 one?
That's total. So for 48, we have less than 30 students in there attending.
This is just between the 2 schools.
Correct.
And I know it's hard to find somebody to fill these positions, but $1.5 million to $2 million is a lot.
Also, to clarify, they also have students from other districts that attend. So there's not just Liberty students there.
Right, but there is a, they have to pay to do that, to send their students, the districts that are sending their students.
Correct. Okay. But Liberty isn't charging rent. So they have the space at no charge.
Well, that one I would be in favor of us looking to see if we can staff it again and get rid of this contract. Thank you.
I think to answer your question, Mr. Cercioni, I do think like the idea is kind of for us to pick through it, I guess, to what, we can agree to do. I don't think, obviously we can't do a large number of the additions really. And, I would only be in favor of doing reductions that we have a clear number, I guess, of how much it is so that we go in with the right understanding of how much we can then add.
I guess I was trying to say, like, I was just confused why why the district's recommending 6 cuts and then at the same time asking for full-time teachers back in the same slide. It's kind of confusing.
And that was just from the staffing model based on the governing board recommendations per class. So kinder recommended at certain number of students, first grade to third grade, middle school. So it was based on the governing board's recommendation for class sizes. That's where the 6 FTE came into play for the reductions if we were to staff it according to the governing board's recommendation for class size.
So, Mr. Cercioni, I think the bottom, the reductions, is sort of what we need to do to get the budget. The top is like your wish list at Christmas for what you hope your parents are going to give you. Not everything is going to happen, but like ranked in order, this is what, if we could do everything, this is what we would do. And now we just have to, reduce from the bottom in order to add some things from the top. So it is a little bit of both. Just figuring out where to reduce in order to add.
I understand what you're saying. Just personally, if I made it, I wouldn't say cut and give me back the same thing at the same time.
And I would like us to consider at least eliminating 1 champs between Liberty and Loretta and not necessarily adding it to the FTEs, but then allowing the flexibility for where we need it in classrooms. Because again, I think if we are looking at the staffing model and what we give our other schools, you can make that work. And then it would free us up another FTE for like DLI and, things that we may not be able to make work. And if we give Loretta the 1.5 in 6th and 1.5 in 7th to be what the other schools are getting with those similar numbers, then that would give us another FTE.
I have a question about the June benefits for non-renewed staff line. So currently they get benefits through June and that would end July 1 or June 30. But is the idea to end it early? Is that not already contracted to them? Do they not expect that they would get them through June at this current point?
So the history of the district is to pay the teachers even if they quit or resign through June. And to me, that's a gift of public funds because they are not our employees. And so their benefits should stop the day of their last day of physical work because they have resigned and said, I am not coming back next year. And so their benefits should stop. And so by doing this, it would free up about $60,000.
Okay, thank you for, I'm sorry. I'm just surprised that we would pay benefits to somebody who is not employed any longer. But
is that in their contract though?
No. Benefits are not part of a contract.
Okay.
Sorry. All right, so I think there's a number of things that the board just needs to hear, I guess, clarifications from this reduction considerations list. Can administration just go through it line by line real quick because, we're kind of picking and choosing, but
Some of these we've already talked about, but if you could just real quick run through it and explain what each one is, that we can get a grasp.
Thank you, Member Kenyon. Madam President, members of the board, I'm going to tag team this with Ms. Williams because she's got some numbers and I'll kind of go through things. So the top one, I think we've talked about the reduction of 6 FTEs. The next one is reduction of 0.5 FTE classified. At Blue Horizons, currently the staff there, the front office is at 2.5. So we'd just be bringing that into an equitability across all school sites, one office manager and one secretary. So that's the reduction there. Just had a conversation. I'm sorry. And if you have any questions, stop me as we go through. Okay. The June benefits for non-renewed staff, just had a discussion on that. Okay. Permanent guest teacher. So we discussed that one as a possibility. The consultant for HR, this was support needed during a staff who has been absent in the HR department. So we've been heavily relied upon a consultant there and throughout this year. So if we fully staff the assistant superintendent of HR and student services, I don't feel that that would be, there might be a small nominal fee if they're working on contracts or something like that outside if we consult that out. But otherwise, I don't believe that that would be something that would be such a high expense.
Just a quick question. So are we no longer using consulting services for HR at this time?
Member Zimmerman, Madam President, members of the board, no, we are, and I appreciate that Dr. Avila stepped in as acting assistant superintendent of HR and student services. However, there is a lot to do at this time of year, so we are still consulting at this point in time to get us through the end of the year, but we're talking about next school year.
Okay.
We just talked about the level D school sped rebid. The next one is instructional coach, new. So Mr. Mann had some conversations with, oh my goodness, I can't remember Mr. Mann who you spoke with, but we are able to pay for any new instructional coaches out of that classroom site fund if you wanted to. So that would look like right now we only have a 0.4 instructional coach at Loretta Zumbro. So if we were going to add to make it a full-time instructional coach at Loretta Zumbro, we could add a 0.6 and pay that out of classroom site funds. So that's what that example is. Also Estrella Mountain, we have a shared 0.8 IC, 0.2 AP. So if we're going to add an additional instructional coach, the 0.2, that would be new, could possibly be paid out of the classroom site fund. So that's what that is referencing.
Can I just ask a question? Do we pay any full salaries out of classroom site fund, like somebody's full FTE out of classroom site fund right now?
Yes, I believe so. I've seen that, but I can't tell you exactly who they are. I could bring that back to you.
I would be very curious to know that information.
Okay, moving on. We talked about kinder screeners for the gifted. The next one there, preschool and transportation. This is an area that seems to be very bloated as we have started to investigate a little bit. I would like to do a deeper dive into preschool and the transportation. You see some numbers there. Again, I got all these numbers from Ms. Williams, and I appreciate her giving me these numbers, but I think we can really reduce there in preschool.
I have a question. Ms. Williams, so did you calculate that 650 for transportation for preschool?
We worked together on that number. I don't remember the exact formula that we used. We did that last Thursday.
Okay. Just because our budget for transportation, I looked on the last month, is like 2.4. So we're kind of saying that our preschool transportation, now mind you, these are for IEP only students that we're transporting for preschool.
And transportation, and that's at little parentheses there, the transportation for preschool is about $2,000 a day. And then the transportation, I said trans at $650,000, $650K. That was, I think, what we determined based on salaries of paras and drivers. That's where that 650 came from, just the drivers and para cost.
Okay. But we are only transporting students with IEPs, correct?
I do not Did you?
Hence our thought we need a deeper dive into this.
Right.
all things
I'm just
preschool.
asking
Yeah.
a question about.
At this time, most students with IEPs are automatically granted transportation.
Right. Because that is part of FAPE. Okay.
Sort of.
And again, there you see under the preschool and transportation, the current staff that's in a preschool the cost is $914,000. The transportation at $650 is the drivers plus the aides that ride along. So adding those together, then subtracting the ADM that we get would be $163,000. And I believe on the follow-up page that was based on 32 students. So therefore, looking at, it costs us about $1.4 million. I'm sorry, $1.4 million for preschool. And that was just a quick look. So I think we need to do a deeper dive into preschool.
Okay. But we cannot eliminate preschool because we have to at least service the students that have IEPs. So I just want to be clear that this is what it costs, but that's not necessarily going to be a savings because we still have to service children that are 3 years old that have an IEP.
And we're currently 32 students is what we're receiving money for. Additionally, we charge a fee for non-students with special educational needs, and that goes into a separate fund that we don't, that's like takes care of like daily expenses. Sometimes we might see a little bit go back into M&O, but talking with Ms. Williams, probably not. So those fees are kind of washed. So this is the amount that we're spending right now on preschool. Moving on to Ed Services, curriculum and assessment costs. I've been working with the Ed Services team. Appreciate their, just been a quick review. We will continue to look at all the costs, but we feel like we'd be able to do some reductions there, and I can give you more details if you'd like on that. And then, of course, the last one, stipends, and that's the number that I got from the original stipend list that we're paying over $4 million in stipends.
Madam President?
Yes, please go ahead.
No, I appreciate you going through this list. The stipends, obviously, that's a huge one. I think that we need to actually have a special session to talk about that and see what maybe administration can recommend some things to the board for that. Dr. Avila, the kindergarten screeners, is there a benefit to that you can think of us keeping that? Or else I do agree with Board Member Zimmerman that I don't know that that's necessary at this time.
Member Kenyon, if I could speak to that quickly, and I've got Ms. Benson in the audience. We don't have a microphone podium. I'm not sure how you're going to speak to this, but she is our coordinator of assessment. Would you come up here, Ms. Benson, because she actually is involved in that, so she can speak exactly to that. We've had some conversations, and she too feels like that we could eliminate this. Thank you, Ms. Benson.
All right. So yes, kindergarten screeners. So right now this is for universal. All kinders are getting that COGAT test, but we can still offer the COGAT test during our normal rounds. We do 3 throughout the year. So any parent or teacher that wants to recommend a kinder to be tested can just join those rounds instead of doing this big universal, big test window.
Could I ask another question?
Go for it.
So do we screen again in second grade, everybody?
So right now, board policy is that we screen all kinders and all second graders.
Okay, so we're screening again.
Yep.
Are they taking is everyone taking the full test in second or a screener?
Great question. Yes, let's clarify. In second grade, they're taking the full test right out of the gate. They're all doing it. In kinder, there's a pre-screener, and those who qualify then take the rest of the test.
Okay.
Yep.
And I would be curious to know how much it costs to do the full test for second grade instead of screening them first to see if, because it's probably not necessary for every single second grader to take the gifted test when typically we identify 5% of students. But I know that I didn't ask for that number, so I'm not expecting you to come up with it right now.
Yeah, personally, I'm okay with screening the second graders. There's a lot of really, really intelligent kids out there that need that challenge. And a lot of times they don't get identified unless there's a screening. So I'm okay with the second graders. The kindergartners, that's the question, right? And as long as parents know that they can recommend their kid to be screened for that, I think that still is valid and we're still there. But just automatically screening them all, in a couple of years, these kids change so much, so you don't really know. So, yeah, that's all I have on that one.
And if it is in policy, we'll need to make sure that we adjust policy for kindergarten screeners.
Yeah, we'll have to check on the policy on that.
Thank you, Ms. Benson.
You got it.
Any other questions or discussion? Does anybody have a motion they'd like to make possibly?
Madam President?
Yes, please.
I don't know that I'm ready for a motion just yet, but I would appreciate it if administration can look at our discussion and kind of see what's going on between the board and bring back kind of a answer to some of these questions and hopefully some recommendations, hopefully fairly soon, because we need to get this going.
Go ahead, Mr.
Board members, we can look at that and, for example, even bring an proposed staffing model for CHAMPS, because there are staffing models that other districts use. For example, 500 to 700 students. I mean, they do the same thing. They use number of sections, number of students per section, and then staff FTE that way. So using that model, basically the same approach, we can bring back recommendations to you, as well as looking at the APs. That was another question. So we can definitely look at models, bring those to you for recommendations, just to propose.
I would be in favor of making some sort of motion to offer raises, because I know that some staff is waiting to sign their contracts for us to offer a raise. So I would love to see us get to some sort of agreement at the basic level tonight about either some basic reductions and then bring back some other ones. But I'm afraid if we push off offering raises that we are going to lose staff. And I would be comfortable offering the 2% for certified, and then 2%, basically 2% across the board. And then when we get more information about other reductions, then we can look at the step, but at least giving every single person in our district 2%, which would be $440,000.
Madam President?
Yes, please.
The board can stop me if they want to, but just to move this along, I think the administration knows kind of what the direction is the board has for them, bringing information back and recommendations back. With what board member Zimmerman said, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the recommended 2% raise for all staff, and approve the teacher increase paid from the 301 fund. And the rest to be followed up on.
I'll second, but can we have a little discussion before we vote, please?
All right, we have a motion and a second, but discussion is open.
Okay. I'm okay with it, but I just want to make sure that administration brings back, kind of the specific reductions, because we have to balance the budget, right? If we approve this motion, we've now added $440,000 to the budget. So I just want to make sure that we're cognizant that we then reduce it, and I think that we can, and why I'm comfortable going forward tonight with what we have, but I just want us to be very specific. So I'd really like to see that come at the April meeting.
Madam President, if I may.
Go ahead.
Ms. Williams, you were here the last time we did this. If you recall, we actually had the spreadsheet up and we were able to move things around and it self-calculated everything. So made it really easy when the board decided, hey, let's throw that in, let's take that out, and it automatically calculated everything. If we could have that the next time we come together, that would be very nice.
Madam President, if I may.
Go ahead.
I also make it clear, like, I'm not comfortable reducing the 6 teachers when we're thinking there's a ton of money out in the stipends that we can get to. Like, I would like a better grasp on the stipends before we start cutting teacher positions.
All right.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. The reason, I went through the reason that I'm okay with them is because when you look, I took the 0.5s and I added them together and I made it work where these teachers aren't dividing kids. And it does fit within the board approved class size numbers, because you have to remember that we're going to have less kindergartners than we have 8th graders. So we should be reducing some FTEs. The place that I'm concerned about is Las Brisas and Liberty, just because I can't make it work in my head. And I have done a master schedule for a K-8 school before. And so I know how hard it is. So that's why I would be okay with that number, because I also think we're adding too many to Loretta.
Well, we can also leave those, right, in the FTEs and not fill them, but just still have the money budgeted for them. Doesn't mean we have to fill them, but it's harder to go back and add them to the budget later.
Yes, but that's a big chunk of money. And if we don't cut some FTEs, I don't know how we're going to come up with over $650,000.
I agree. And that's why we need to get a better grasp on these $4 million stipends.
Yep. Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and we've had some discussion with some direction for what we would like to see come back at our April meeting. And then we had plenty of discussion around the biggest things in the reduction considerations that we thought were probably, where we would like to see some things happening, and they were some of the biggest ticket items. And so I think they can come in. So there's some things to be done between now and when we meet again in April. But we do have a motion and we do have a second, so we can take a vote on that. Do we remember what we're voting on, or do we need it read back? Okay. Just checking. All right, so we'll take the vote. Member Kenyon?
Aye.
Member Zimmerman?
Aye.
Vice President Cirincione?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. Will show that passed 4-0. All right, moving on to item 5.2, discussion approval of employment contract for Superintendent Dr. Bridget Doozy. We'll open up for discussion or questions at this time.
I just want to say I'm very excited to see this on the agenda and to welcome our new superintendent. The only thing that I had were some grammar. There's 4 places that have his instead of her.
Yes, we are aware.
Okay. So I have the page numbers.
We know all of them. Sorry. I will admit that I reviewed this contract multiple times, and so did multiple lawyers. And Ms. Camerata is the one who noticed the pronoun errors after we approved it and attached it to the agenda. So, and and Loretta Zembro apparently also caught them, but the rest of us all missed them in the multiple times reading through it. We can have it fixed, and we are aware. So Miss O'Brien is already aware and is supposed to be working on fixing it. We just didn't get an updated one to get today because we caught them over the weekend. But yes, thank you for that.
Madam President, if I may.
Yes, please.
I'm also very thrilled about Dr. Doozy wanting to come and be our superintendent. I had a number of people actually reach out to me and they were like, wow, you were able to pull her away. And they were very happy for us as a district, even people within her own district. And so they were hoping to hold on to her, but I'm glad we were able to steal her away, I think, and depending on the board voting tonight. I do have a question, though, more of a comment. So in the contract, because it is public, I'm just going to spell it out. Number 11, when it talks about the additional stipend. In previous superintendent contracts, this was directly tied, they did receive this amount. This was tied to civic engagement. This was tied to, when you go and take, the mayor out for lunch or something, or you're doing some community event and the superintendent pays for it. This was what this was intended for in previous contracts. I just want to make sure that, or I hope that's the intent of this and not just an additional stipend with no attachments. So I would recommend that legal probably needs to look at this if the board's willing, and just to be able to tie this into what it was in previous contracts instead of just an additional $7,500.
The stipend is, can I say? Yeah.
So if legal needs to review this and to
yeah.
make sure that we're good, that should be fine. I just know that in previous superintendent contracts,
Yeah,
that's
legal,
what
sorry,
this was.
legal did review, and I don't know that I can say publicly, but it was reviewed by legal multiple times, and it was what was agreed upon. Any more, I think, would need to be done in executive session.
I'm not saying that that's, I'm thrilled that Dr. Doozy would like to come and work for our district. It's not a make or break for me, but it is one of those things. I hope that is the intent of what that is there for.
And I just want to clarify that legal has reviewed this contract.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Multiple times.
All right. I'm ready to make a motion. I motion to approve appointment contract of Superintendent Dr. Bridget Doozy.
I'll second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. We can take a vote. Member Kenyon?
Aye.
Member Zimmerman?
Aye.
Member Cirincione?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We'll show that passed 4-0. And welcome, Dr. Doozy. You want to get a photo? A photo? Okay. Would you mind joining us for a photo with the board? All right. Agenda item 5.3, approval of the salary wage schedules for FY 26-27.
Madam President, members of the board, if I may, just what's attached there is just our current salary schedule for this year. And we were just waiting for direction from you for the increase, if you so choose. And I believe we voted for the 2%, so we can put that on here.
Okay, but these are for new hires. So would we be giving them the 2%? Because then people that have worked in the district 1 year would be making the same amount of money as a new hire, which usually doesn't feel very good to staff. So I'm not sure that the 2% would be added.
Yeah, the 2% is an increase for current staff, so it wouldn't be added here.
So, okay, so we would, because these salary schedules are last year's, so we would just approve them, but potentially minus the stipends since we haven't discussed them.
So, Madam President, members of the board, thank you for that clarification, Member Zimmerman. And yes, I do agree with you. What we could do is just post this as it is, and we could remove the stipend areas and as it approved tonight, if you decide to go in that direction, and we can just remove the stipends from this. And what I mean by stipends is where it spells it out.
Yes.
There's an area at the bottom.
Yeah.
Let me just be specific. In the middle, where it talks about certificated endorsement stipends, standard ESL, standard gifted, reading, math specialists. So those would just be removed. The special assignment stipends and the other stipends. The other stipends do include the doctorate degree and national board certification. So if you want me to remove all three with approval of tonight, or what your recommendation would be.
And just to be clear that there are stipends on every single one of these wage schedules, not just the certified. But I'll go ahead and take a stab at the motion. Motion to approve the salary wage schedules for 26-27 as presented with the removal of all stipends from all wage schedules. Okay. Motion to approve the salary wage schedules for FY 26-27 as presented with the removal of all stipends from all schedules.
Okay, President Schmidt and governing board members, the motion will read to approve the salary wage schedules for FY 26-27 as presented with the removal of all stipends from all schedules.
That's correct.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We can take a vote. Sorry, go ahead. You had a discussion point?
I just want staff to understand, because I know that this is going to make staff nervous because, some people have a lot tied into stipends, and we are not saying that we're not going to issue them. We just need more time to evaluate them, and we'll hopefully come back at the April meeting. So I just want to be clear that we're not removing them forever, but that I think the intention is to certainly bring some of them back. Speaking for myself.
No, I think that it's good to, state publicly that we're removing them from the wage salary schedule for right now so that they can be reevaluated, and they, maybe might change slightly or whatever we need to do to make it fit into the budget, but it is not the intention to wipe them out and to not compensate teachers for the things that they're doing. Just so that is clear to everybody. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. We can take a vote. Member Kenyon?
Aye.
Member Zimmerman?
Aye.
Member Cirincione?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We'll show that passed 4-0. Okay. Item 5.4, discussion consideration of Westside Impact School District intergovernmental agreement. This came before the board previously. It is coming back again. So, Ms. May, would you like to?
Madam President, members of the board. Yes, so in front of you again is the Westside Impact. As we reached out to them, we have a little bit more information, so not much, but a little bit. Again, we paid the invoice for this agreement back in July for $6,411.33. We just simply did not sign the contract. Legal has reviewed. They said that we're okay to move forward. Based on the last conversation we had, the concern was, what are we receiving from this? And then also signing a 5-year agreement on it. So we did use Westside Impact, this agreement for the spelling bee and also for the math challenge. And we're looking forward to moving on to the district math challenge through Westside Impact. Also, we do have the Teacher of the Year and Principal of the Year at $250 each. That also comes from this. So I know we were trying to balance out the costs and is it worth it? In my opinion, here we are the end of March now and it's already been paid. They just need a signed agreement. We make the motion for just this year to reevaluate for future years, something like that. But anyways, it is there for your discussion and consideration.
Thank you. Ms. Schmidt.
Yes, please.
Okay. I am fine with moving forward with this. I think, to give our students the opportunity to kind of move on for a spelling bee and math challenge and give them other opportunities. I think science fair, if they wanted to, might even be included here. And certainly to be able to recognize our teachers and our principals is always a nice thing to be able to do. I think, when we look at the grand scheme of things, 6,000 when we're already essentially getting 2,200 back of that. And then, there are things that they incur costs for the math challenge, for spelling bee, all of those things. So I'm okay with moving forward with this.
Madam President.
Yes, please.
Initially, I was concerned about this just because from a fiscal standpoint, we, as everybody just heard, we really haven't even started diving very deep in the budget. We need to get much deeper. As you've already said, Ms. May, that we're kind of at this point in the year, we probably just need to agree to it this year. I am not okay with signing up for a 5-year though. Personally, I think that if we do this, it needs to be a year to year and evaluated because if you read the contract, they can change the fee and there's a number of different things that I don't necessarily agree with, but there's some benefit to it. Of course, it is almost $6,500 or $6,400. So, when we're going to be looking at the budget, we do need to evaluate if this is a necessity or if it's just something that's a little above and beyond. I do think it's above and beyond. I think some of these things we can do within our district a lot cheaper. However, as stated, we're kind of at this point in the year, might as well finish out the year and evaluate it for the next year.
President Schmidt
Yes, please.
and fellow board members, the agreement that I have in front of me is for the 5-year. I did put in the description here, if the governing board determines not to sign the IGA, Littleton ESD, the Westside Impact fiscal year or fiscal agent will return the membership dues paid for FY26. If we do not sign the IGA, I can go back and maybe try to get a 1-year. But for me to submit or be able to submit Teacher of the Year and our Outstanding Principal of the Year, we have already passed the deadline. It was on the 20th.
Ms. Camerata, so this dollar amount is per year, correct? It's not It's not $6,400 for 5 years.
According to the attached, the purchase order that Ms. Mosier entered, it is per year.
Correct. But even though we paid it, they can still up it according to the contract.
I'm not too familiar with this, but it's a ADM fee, which I think is an average of $1.50 per student ADM.
Right, but they can change that $1.50 and move it up. So
Of course.
that's kind of what I'm getting at is we don't know what this is going to cost us in year 3 or in year 4 or in year 5. So that's kind of my concern. I would be all for us going back and seeing if they can do a 1 year. If they don't want to do a 1 year, I'm honestly not interested in signing a 5-year contract with them. So that's me personally. The board can decide.
You know, this IGA is made up of public school districts. And so I don't personally think that the public school districts are out to try to like make money on us. I think they're just literally trying to cover their costs for the events they provide. And then the stipend, I don't know if we call it a stipend, but you know, the winners get. So, you know, I'm not concerned that they're going to like start really upping it. That's just my personal opinion. I think everybody in public education is aware of this state that this is in, the state of our education system. So, but.
President Schmidt.
Yes,
and
please.
Board members, Ms. Williams, do you know if the PO was the same amount last year?
No, I do not know, because if it's based on ADM, I would assume it has gone up or down depending on our ADM.
Yeah.
Madam President, members of the board, with that information, maybe I'd recommend the board consider something like directing us to reach out for a 1-year agreement, if they're willing to do that. Otherwise, perhaps not knowing now, thank you, Ms. Camarada, that the money would be refunded to us, and we've already missed out on the Teacher of the Year.
So did they say we could submit those names late if we approve it tonight?
President Schmidt and members of the board, Vivian did say I could submit it once the IGA was signed.
Oh, okay.
Early May is the event over at Grand Canyon University.
Yeah. So we would need to, I mean, yeah.
We either need to decide or not decide tonight.
Critical. And we already do have district spelling bee winners and math challenge winners that are moving forward in the events. And I also was glad that you mentioned that we don't currently have any schools that participate in the science fair, but there is a science fair piece of it as well that we could participate in the future if we continue with Westside Impact.
And they do have grants available, correct? I think we talked about this. We just don't necessarily take advantage of them at this time.
Yeah, it says there's teacher grants.
I make a motion to approve the Westside Impact School District's intergovernmental agreement.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We can take a vote. Member Kenyon?
Nay.
Member Zimmerman?
Aye.
Member Cirincione?
Aye.
Also an aye. Will show that passed 3-1. Moving on to agenda item 5.5, call for executive session pursuant to ARS 38-431.03, A3 and 4, to receive legal advice concerning Maricopa County Super Court Case number CV 2025-060383, and to instruct its attorney concerning the board's position in settlement discussions pertaining to that action.
Make a motion.
Yes, please.
Motion to call for executive session pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A3 and 4 to receive legal advice concerning Maricopa County Superior Court Case number CV 2025-060383 and to instruct its attorney concerning the board's position in settlement discussion pertaining to that action.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. We can take a vote. Member Zimmerman?
Member Cirincione?
Aye. Member Cirincione?
Aye.
Member Zimmerman?
Member Cirincione?
Aye.
All right, we have a motion
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Are you ready for the vote, Ms. Camerata? All right. Member Kenyon?
Aye.
Member Zimmerman?
Abstain, and I'd like to explain my vote.
Vice President Ceransoni?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We'll show that's 3 ayes and 1 abstention. Ms. Zimmerman, you can explain.
I will not be participating in the executive session as is a conflict of interest.
All right. And we will move into executive session at 6:55 p.m. 2026, we can reconvene the public meeting at 7:09 p.m. And item 5.7, instructions to attorney concerning settlement discussions in Maricopa County Superior Court case number CV 2025-060383.
Madam President, motion to approve settlement agreement, Maricopa County Superior Court number CV 2025-060383, and declare the agenda item and investigation report as described in the agreement null and void.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We can take a vote. Member Kenyon?
Aye.
Member Zimmerman?
Abstain.
Member Cirincione?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We will show that that passed 3 ayes, 1 abstention. Item 6.1, board comments on agenda topics and items for future consideration. Any requests for agenda topics specifically outside of all of the things that we said earlier?
Outside of today's?
If you have ones from earlier that you know for sure, it would be great to list them out again, I think, just for clarification for everybody. So I think...
I'm good. As long as the big thing was just to kind of some of the stuff we went over today.
So I have special session for stipends that we're asking for that, but we also want them reviewed before we meet again. So I have that written down. Then there was all of the budget things that we asked for, but are there other, did you want a MEG review? I think I wrote that down too, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I think so. As part of the budget reductions, I just want to make sure that on April 13th, I'm pretty sure that's our next meeting, that district admin comes with the list of reductions, or at least to start some of them, and I just don't want to push it out too far where we've, essentially the way that I look at it, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to.
Yep. Stay on topic.
And you're talking about specifics for the stipend reductions, correct?
Not necessarily all the different reductions that we talked about.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Any other topic items right now? Okay. If there are other things that you remember or come up with, they can always be added to the spreadsheet and emailed to me. That would be perfect. Thank you so much. Agenda item 7.1, upcoming board meetings. So we do have a board meeting on Monday, April 13th. Then we have this special board meeting on Monday, April 27th, and another regular board meeting on Monday, May 11th. And we can move on to 8.1 and adjourn this meeting at 7:12 p.m. I mean, when the audience applauds, I'm like...